Welcome into Off the Hook Sports, everybody. I am Caleb Calhoun. Dave Hooker is out with a doctor's appointment today. So I am riding solo. We've got a lot to get to. Tennessee basketball scores a big win Wednesday night against Missouri. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk a little bit about National Signing Day. Shockingly quiet, even more quiet from Tennessee's perspective. So we're going to talk about both of those. A lot to get to there. There is a rules change coming to college football, not confirmed, but further discussions on it. We're going to talk about those because they directly affect Tennessee. And honestly, it's just the right thing to do. I don't know, though, if there could be unintended consequences of it. There are things to be concerned about there. And most notably, we have the Lady Vols and UConn tonight in women's basketball. I'm going to dive in a little bit into the history of that rivalry because we know that it's wasn't the cleanest rivalry. It was beyond bitter, put it that way, between Gino Auriemma and the late Pat Summitt. And I'm going to dive into things that happened there and really try to give an objective take on it. So we got a lot to talk about, and we are live from the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln studio. Ted Russell Ford Lincoln is your home for the finest vehicles in Knoxville, new and used. East Tennessee's largest Ford and Lincoln volume dealer. Also, the show is brought to you by Banks & Jones. T. Scott Jones, banksandjones.com. Let's get rolling. Tennessee basketball beats Missouri 85-81 in what was a surprisingly tough game Wednesday night. Tennessee basketball did what needed to be done to win. The Vols got Igor Milicic Jr. and Zakai Ziegler back in their starting lineups, and boy, did they need them. Zakai Ziegler and Milicic each scored 21 points. So today's tough question is this, and I'm just going to pose it. I'm going to ask it for the message board. Did Tennessee show itself to be a team that can make a deep NCAA tournament run with Wednesday night's win over Missouri? Tennessee, for those who don't know, scored 28 points in the first half and 57 points in the second half of that game, which was kind of wild to think about. It was 85-81, but it was actually a lot more of a blowout than that when you really look at the stats and the breakdown and everything like that. Tennessee had a 74-61 lead with 3 minutes to go and played free throw shooting the rest of the game while Missouri was coming back with a bunch of threes. Missouri ended up shooting 40% from three on the night, and they only committed 3 turnovers against that Rick Barnes defense in that building. And it's not like the defense was bad. Missouri was just playing very disciplined basketball. They looked very good, and it was a lot for Tennessee to have to deal with. They needed their offense to show up, and their offense did show up. I think despite a close win in a game that they were favored to win by more, it was still against a ranked team, and a ranked team that played very well, and a ranked team that's on a roll that beat 2 ranked teams on their own last week. I actually think Tennessee showed more in their win over Missouri than they did in their win over Florida. I know that's crazy. Florida, they beat a top 5 team by 20 points, but that was more about how, yes, Tennessee's defense was good. Yes, Chaz Lanier showed up, but Florida just had an awful shooting performance that Saturday. It was a noon Saturday game at Thompson Bowling Arena. Missouri was rested, was ready for this game. They played as well as you could possibly play. And don't forget, Missouri beat Florida at Florida. So this team is very capable. And I think given what Missouri threw at Tennessee, Tennessee's ability to win this game and score 85 points actually is more impressive than their win over Florida for a couple of reasons. One, I think that, again, they showed they could – actually, here's the biggest one. They found new ways to score. How did they beat Missouri last night, particularly after trailing 34-28 at halftime? Igor Milicic Jr., coming back from an illness on Saturday, absolutely asserted himself in the paint for the first time all year. Everybody give Igor Milicic Jr. a round of applause. If you're at your desk right now, stand up just figuratively and give him a round of applause. We've been calling for this for a while. Now, he was still 2 of 3 from 3. He was efficient from the free throw line, and you want him to be able to stretch the court by shooting the 3 ball well. But one of the biggest issues with Igor Milicic Jr. has been One, when his three-point shot is not falling, he doesn't find other ways to score despite his size. That wasn't the case in this game. He played big. He played physical. He played tough. The man came away with 21 points, 10 rebounds, 4 blocked shots, 5 assists. Give that man credit. Igor Milicic Jr. did exactly what he needed to do to help Tennessee win this game. And here's the key on this. If Igor Milicic can body people under the basket and score from the paint and score from the mid-range, Tennessee has a way to manufacture buckets when things are going very poorly. And that's what he was doing in the second half. That is a new element to his game that we didn't see. Then comes Zakai Ziegler. Zakai Ziegler was 4 of 4 from 3. And you heard Missouri talk about after the game how they basically let him shoot and were shocked that he did that well from 3 because he hasn't been good from 3 all year. And he scored 21 points. He gets a lot of credit. But most notably, 2 things. Chaz Lanier only had 10 points, was 2 of 5 from 3 from the game. But they keyed in on him, and he didn't take himself out of the game. And what I mean by that is he was consistently moving, consistently doing cuts and things like that. And Felix Opera, under the basket, got 12 points, went 4 of 5 on free throws, made himself an offensive threat under the basket. Why is that relevant? If you have to respect Opera's game, and a lot of people have been noting that his free throw shooting has actually been solid from form all year, it just hasn't been going in, and finally it started going in. So if you have to respect him under the basket offensively, because if you foul him, he'll hit his free throws. If Igor Milicic adds in the element of scoring under the basket, if Chaz Lanier remains the threat from the perimeter that everybody focuses on, you're really starting to spread the defense out a little thin, guys. And that's why Zakai was able to be so deadly from 3 yesterday, because he had better looks than he's had all year. And all of a sudden, you have the most complete offense that you could possibly have. And by the way, Jemai Mashak only had 7 points, but did hit a 3 and was 2 or 3 from the field. When you gave him the ball, you had to respect him to a certain degree. Jordan Gainey had 10 off the bench. But the big thing here is Tennessee can now play inside-out basketball. They can play inside-out basketball. You have to respect at least 4 scorers on the court at any time. And you have to respect the ability of most of the bigs to score from multiple places. That's why yesterday's game was by far, I think, I don't want to say most impressive, because look, beating Florida without Igor or Zakai Ziegler stands out. But I want to say most meaningful when trying to determine whether or not this team is capable of making a run in the NCAA tournament. Missouri played the type of game yesterday that if you ran into that team in the NCAA tournament, they would beat you. This is the type of low seed that upsets you in the NCAA tournament. And Missouri's not a low seed, by the way. They're a top 5, top 4 seed in the NCAA tournament. Not like overall, just in one of the brackets. But if a lower seed plays like them in a neutral court, that's how they upset you. They shoot very well from 3, and they don't turn the ball over. And that's exactly what Missouri did. And they did it in Thompson-Boling Arena on a Wednesday night, which is a big deal. So if this is on a neutral site or if this is at Missouri, Tennessee's losing this game. And you kind of got to, I mean, you can't even get mad. It's one of those games you lose where you just tip your cap to the other team for doing everything right. So it's a big deal that Tennessee was able to get this win. I think this is what's going to allow them to make a deep run in the NCAA tournament. So I'm setting up the poll question now, and we'll just go ahead and ask it. Did Tennessee's win over Missouri prove the Vols can make a deep run in the NCAA tournament? Answers are yes. Offense revealed new ways to score. I'm sorry. Yes, Vols revealed new ways to score. Almost done, guys. Or no, they barely won. All right. So I'm going to say yes. Vols showed new ways to score. I think the fact that they could score, the fact that Milicic could score from the paint was one of the biggest deals. It was so huge. And Matt SS says there were only 15 three-point attempts, shot 66% from 3 and 50% from the field. Still was close, shows Missouri ain't no joke. That is true, Matt. It was never really in question after, like, late. I know Missouri kept making it close and close, but as long as Tennessee was hitting their free throws, and they were going to hold off and win. Dylan Elam has a point per Jordan Moore. Tennessee is 10-0 when taking 30-plus shots from the paint. Yeah, you got to play inside out. I'm not trying to be old school. 3-point shooting wins this day and age of college basketball, but Tennessee's got to play inside out. Igor Milicic just can't camp out on the perimeter. He's got to be able to make you respect his ability to score in the paint, and he did that in this game. Chaz Lanier has to get involved and stay involved. Even when he's not the main scorer like last night, he's got to stay involved. I don't put a lot of blame of Zakai's poor shooting before last night, which he didn't play on Saturday. I never really put that on him. And I know that's controversial, but if you think about it, Zakai Ziegler, a lot of him doing that had way more to do with the fact that he was in moments where the star scorers took themselves out of the game. And I think that was always a big issue. I mean, just notably, we have to point out that Chaz Lanier got called out for taking himself out of the game a week ago against Kentucky. Before that, he was benched for having a play call for him to score and not actually going up to score, which is an issue. So when you take those things into account, you have to think about the fact that, honestly, Chaz Lanier and Igor Milicic not doing what they need to do offensively are why Zakai Ziegler has been taking a lot of bad shots before last night. So they really have to address that. The show represented by Banks & Jones, tscottjones.com, banksandjones.com.
Why Banks & Jones? Well, it's because they're Tennessee's trial attorney. You can play to win with Banks & Jones because they'll go to trial. You've heard of other lawyers. They say they'll go to trial and fight for you. They won't. They just want to settle. That's the easiest way out. Well, that's not Banks & Jones, led by T. Scott Jones. They won't settle. They'll go to trial for you. Tennessee's trial attorney. They play to win. Truly, Tennessee's trial attorney when it comes to criminal defense or personal injury. Why settle? It's Banks & Jones. T. Scott Jones.
All right, our poll question: did Tennessee's win over Missouri prove the Vols can make a deep run in the NCAA tournament? Yes, the Vols showed new ways to score. No, they barely won. 71% are saying yes, the Vols showed new ways to score. 29% are saying no, they barely won. Again, I understand the no that they barely won, but I'm going with the yes. They showed new ways to score. That's my hot take on this one. I totally understand you, Dylan, that you need to see consistency, and part of that is the offense needs to be willing to do what they did yesterday and play inside out. I wouldn't have said that about last year's offense. This is a different team. You got two bigs that are threats in their own way. And Matt says you've been chirping inside out for weeks. Exactly. And Matt has another good point. You got to prove to be dominant on the road to prove they can go deep in March. Well, Matt, I will say they did put up a fight against Auburn, but I'm actually on your side on that. They haven't proven that yet. So with that in mind, I think Tennessee did show a good bit in this win over Missouri. Finding multiple ways to score was a huge deal, particularly when, look, Chaz Lanier has some limitations. We have to call it what it is. Now, we had Steve Hamer on the show earlier in the week, and he had a great point that a part of this is that Tennessee is still somewhat adjusting to SEC play, because we have to bring up the fact that Tennessee did not play as tough of a schedule that they thought they were going to play at the beginning of the year, because a lot of the teams they scheduled turned out to be bad. And we're talking Baylor, Syracuse, just a lot of games. You guys help me. Who was the coach that bolted like right before the season started? Miami. Just a lot of issues like that. And I think that really started to stand out. And then the SEC turned out to be much, much, much better than we all thought it would be. So with those two things in mind, I think that it caused some major problems for Tennessee. And I think that, honestly, it made SEC play rough at the beginning. I think they are actually getting better now. But to this point, you got to give them some credit. And it Said Russell Ford Lincoln is your home for the finest vehicles in Knoxville, new and used. East Tennessee's largest Ford and Lincoln volume dealer. The show is brought to you by Quality Tire Pro, serving Chattanooga community since 1957. All major brand of tires, full service automotive, brake, alignments, oil changes, and more. QualityTirePros.com. Go in and say Off the Hook sent you. Say, hey, Bo, Off the Hook sent you. QualityTirePros.com. Let's have a little fun, shall we? Because a former Tennessee basketball coach is being looked at in line to be the next general manager of North Carolina. Buzz Peterson has been targeted by North Carolina and Hubert Davis for their new general manager position. North Carolina is following a model that I think Bill Belichick is wanting to do in football now. And if anybody would start this, it'd be Bill Belichick. But it's also one that Stanford is doing. I'm sorry, not Stanford, Cal. Excuse me, Cal is doing. Ron Rivera, former Carolina Panthers, Washington Commanders head coach, has taken a GM role at Cal. The idea is, in the age of NIL, you want someone who evaluates talent and knows how to dole out the money and determine who's more valuable for different spots. So rather than spend ultra amounts of money on extra staff members, spending one on a GM seems valuable. Buzz Peterson is the guy that North Carolina is looking at. Now, let's talk a little bit about Buzz Peterson. Look, his resume is not a good one, okay? In case you guys don't remember, Buzz Peterson took over Tennessee from Jerry Green, who was run out of town because everybody felt that he underachieved with a ton of talent. Those Jerry Green teams, he had 4 straight seasons of 20 or more wins, won 2 SEC Eastern Division titles, won 1 SEC regular season title, made a Sweet 16 one year, got them as high as number 4 at times, had 4 straight NCAA tournament appearances. These were all first for Tennessee basketball, by the way, during this time period. I just want you to know that. So had up until that point, by far the most successful 4-year run in Tennessee basketball history. But people felt he had a stack of talent. They ran him out of town. They hired Buzz Peterson. Buzz Peterson, for those who don't remember, before he got to Tennessee, he had spent 4 years at Appalachian State and actually did a very good job. In 96-97, he went 14-14. 97-98, he went 21-8 and won the Southern Conference. 98-99, he went 21-8 again, won the Southern Conference. 99-2000, he went 23-9, won the Southern Conference, and finally the Southern Conference tournament, which got him into the NCAA tournament, but it was Appalachian State, so they lost in the first round. But still, more than impressive enough to land him a job at a larger school, which was Tulsa. Now, Tulsa, the year before he got there, had gone to the Elite Eight under Bill Self, I believe it was. Buzz Peterson could not match Bill Self's success at all. He took a team that was 32-5 and reached the Elite Eight, and all he did was go 26-11. However, had a strong NIT, won the NIT championship. So his profile was still somewhat high. He was from the area. He seemed like a good guy and a good PR guy compared to Jerry Green, who was a disaster. So Doug Dickey, who never really was good with basketball hires, went and hired Buzz to replace Jerry Green, and Buzz Peterson didn't work out. Went 15-16, 17-12, 15-14, 14-17. But he was Michael Jordan's roommate. Okay. Anyways, Peterson gets fired, goes to Coastal Carolina for 2 years. Then he takes a job with he takes a job with the Charlotte Hornets, or at that time the Charlotte Bobcats, for a couple of years. Goes back into coaching, joins Appalachian State for a year, and then he goes to UNC Wilmington, where he has 4 losing seasons. Then he's fired, and at that point, by 2014, he's not in the market for a head coaching job. So after that, he gets hired by Charlotte, the Hornets again, special advisor to basketball operations. In case you guys don't remember, Buzz Peterson's friends with Michael Jordan. It seemed like Michael Jordan, who was owning the Hornets at the time, throwing him a bone. However, even after Michael Jordan sold the Hornets, Buzz Peterson worked his way up to be the assistant general manager. And so Peterson does have good experience evaluating talent. So let's go back to Tennessee for a minute and ask this question. While Buzz Peterson is probably not the best coach, and not the best actual recruiter in terms of landing the talent. I actually think he's cut out for this job as GM in North Carolina, because I got to say this. In very Jeremy Pruitt fashion, Buzz strikes me as a guy who ain't the brightest with X's and O's, but he can scout talent. In case you guys forgot, Buzz Peterson was the one who recruited Chris Lofton. Buzz Peterson was the one who wanted Dane Bradshaw. Buzz Peterson was the one who wanted Jawan Smith. These are players that, again, Chris Lofton wasn't wanted by Kentucky, wasn't recruited that heavily by Louisville, and Buzz Peterson went out of his way to land Chris Lofton, a 3-star at the time. Turned out to be arguably the greatest player in Tennessee basketball history up until that point. He then went to, he found Jawan Smith, who went from nothing to an all-SEC guard his senior year. Now, yes, Bruce Pearl won with those guys and turned them into great players, but Bruce Pearl never matched the success at Tennessee that he had with those guys, Jawan Smith and Chris Lofton. Buzz also went all in on landing Tyler Smith. Tyler was the guy that he was going to build his program around. And obviously, Tyler Smith ended up going to prep school for a year because once Buzz Peterson was fired, for those who don't remember, his family didn't want him going to Tennessee to play for Bruce Pearl. They didn't trust Bruce Pearl. So Tyler goes to prep school, then goes to Iowa, but then his father's sick. So Tyler comes home and ends up playing for Pearl anyway. But Tyler Smith's success, Buzz Peterson scouted it before anybody. So in terms of just evaluating talent, I think this is a great deal for North Carolina. Buzz Peterson can do that very well. Now, the question you have to ask is, if you're at the level of North Carolina, do you really care about scouting talent or the ability to do that? You should be able to get your pick of the litter of 5 stars. I mean, Hubert Davis should have no problem landing 5-star talent whenever he wants to, because, again, it's North Carolina. I mean, it's one of the premier programs in college basketball. 3 years ago, Hubert Davis had North Carolina in the national championship game. Last year, they won the ACC regular season title and went to Sweet 16. I mean, they're struggling this year. I will say that. So you do want to question, are there some issues? They have played a brutal schedule. I'll give them that. But that doesn't change the fact that they're struggling. So do you, if you're Hubert Davis, go the Buzz Peterson route and try to determine if you need a little more meticulous talent evaluation? Because I actually think Buzz Peterson could do that. And he's familiar with it at the NBA level, not just by being the assistant GM of the Hornets, but by understanding contracts and things like that. So I don't really think this is as bad of a deal as, I mean, we all laugh at Buzz Peterson. I see you guys on the message board. You're having so much fun. And I understand it. But I got to say that while, again, Buzzball was hilarious, Buzz the recruiter wasn't that bad. And Buzz the talent evaluator wasn't that bad. He also went for let's not forget this. He landed Major Wingate, went after Andre Patterson. CJ Watson, I don't give him a lot of credit for. CJ Watson always wanted to go to Tennessee. He was going to end up at Tennessee no matter what. But Buzz did scout guys that were overlooked at the time. And that did lay the foundation for Bruce Pearl to be able to win immediately when he got to Tennessee, which no one thought possible. So just looking at a few questions now. David Speaks is right. He recruited Dane, Smith, and Lofton. Should have been a Final Four team. And Dylan says, as long as he's scouting, that's great for them. I don't expect them to recruit as well, though, just off NIL money. I understand that. And Matt SS asks, speaking of Bruce, is there any chance that Tennessee could hire Bruce after Barnes retires? When you say we are, I assume you're referring to Tennessee. No, that's not happening. Tennessee's not going to hire Bruce Pearl back. There are too many people connected to the program that have been rubbed the wrong way to certain degrees. So that's not happening. Derek says, sounds like a good old boy hire. I mean, most of the jobs Buzz Peterson has ever had have been good old boy hires. This is just the one that he's proven himself the most in, funny enough. So you do have to give him a little bit of credit for that. I know that's kind of crazy to say, but you do have to note that, like, look, at the end of the day, he has NBA experience. He understands the value at the NBA level. I guess you could say that, like, the level of scouting he's done has not been impressive. But at the same time, he did recruit well at Tennessee. So, and I don't mean recruit well by getting the top talent. I mean, he scouted guys that nobody else thought could be good. So that was probably his one biggest strength. So I do think maybe Buzz could handle being GM of North Carolina in that new role. Give me your thoughts real quick. The show brought to you by Double D Piping.
Double D Piping provides full-service fire protection on any scale. From residential homes to government facilities, we can assist any customer through design, fabrication, installation, inspection, and demonstration of fire suppression systems. With 30 years of service across 5 states and a full staff with over 40 years experience, our quality can't be beat. Don't get caught watching what you could have prevented. Call Double D Piping.
All right, what do you guys think? I'll set this up as the poll question. We'll go back to commercial. The question is, what do you think of UNC considering Buzz Peterson for a GM role? You could say, we're going to go with Derek's phrase, good old boy hire, could work, he scouts talent well. All right, so I want to know y'all's thoughts on that. Because, look, I think a lot of people in Knoxville wanted Buzz Peterson to work out. Buzz Peterson was great with the fans, great with the media, great with boosters and donors. I mean, he was your classic, handled them well. So I could see a lot of people were rooting for him. Derek does say North Carolina seems desperate for something for success. Coaching is their issue. Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree at this point. They've been in all these games they've lost, by the way. It's been very close. They just haven't been able to catch the break and win. But we'll kind of see what happens. I mean, this is a little more intriguing than I think we realize. Portions of the program brought to you by Chattanooga Mortgage. Congratulations, your home search just got easier. Buying a home in Chattanooga has never been easier. Chat with 2Ts mortgage.com. Chat with 2Ts mortgage.com. Coming up, National Signing Day. Quiet and forgetful, particularly if you are Tennessee. We're going to talk about that and the non-existent National Signing Day that they had. Stick with us. We'll be back in just 2.5 minutes.
Hey, Ted, it's time to save some cash during New Year's Dash.
Savings is my prime directive. Let's see what you got, Nick.
Right now, you can save up to $10,000 on new Ford F-150s. Beat that, Ted.
Most impressive, but how about 0% for 72 months on Ford Lightning or Ford Mustang Mach-E?
Ted Russell Ford has huge savings on whatever you're looking for.
This checks out.
Come see us today at either Ted Russell Ford location, Parkside Drive, or Kingston Pike, or online at tedrussellford.net.
Now in its 45th year, the second and third generations continue Joe Newbert's commitment.
His vision of what this business needed to be, we still try to live up to that.
Joe Newbert Collision Center.
Having been in the jewelry industry for a long time in the Knoxville community, I saw a need for a jeweler, a real jeweler.
Our ability to do these designs has really been based on the customers bringing new things in and challenging us as a store. Our goal is not to tell anybody what they want. Our goal is to listen to what they want and then help them get there.
Schedule your consultation today to get your special someone the perfect custom gift just in time for the holidays.
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard heating and air conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air. Dare to compare.
Double D Piping provides full-service fire protection on any scale. From residential homes to government facilities, we can assist any customer through design, fabrication, installation, inspection, and demonstration of fire suppression systems. With 30 years of service across 5 states and a full staff with over 40 years experience, our quality can't be beat. Don't get caught watching what you could have prevented. Call Double D Piping.
Welcome back to Off the Hook Sports. I am Caleb Calhoun. This show brought to you by the Hemp House, the premier hemp dispensary online with a wide variety, great selection, and strict standards. Hemp House Chat with 2Ts.com. Hemp House Chat with 2Ts.com. Use the promo code HOOKED for 10% off. That's right, HOOKED for 10% off. All right. National Signing Day happened yesterday, and nobody paid attention. Why? Because of the early signing period, which I hate. I'm just going to be honest with you. I despise. I'd rather just have to be overworked on National Signing Day and because this early signing period puts a lot more work on us as reporters, in case you wonder, and probably on coaches too. But Tennessee wrapped up its recruiting class with the number 11 ranked class in the nation per 247 Sports Composite. They've got 23 enrollees already, 2 who signed letter of intents, Charles House and Joaquin Dotson, plus 4 transfers. So as of right now, they will officially have 29 new players next year. No junior college players. So when you take out the transfers, 25 players that they signed out of high school. They had no activity on National Signing Day, and their class finished outside of the top 10, and their transfer rank finished outside of the top 80. So let's play a little hot or cold. Is this good enough for Tennessee to be a national title contender? And I'm going to talk about a few strategies they're having right now. And I want you guys to tell me, are you hot or cold? First, hot or cold, Tennessee having the number 11 ranked recruiting class. Is that enough to win the national title, particularly when there are 7 that's right, 7 SEC schools ahead of them? Hot or cold? I'm going to say hot. I know that sounds crazy, but I don't think people understand how recruiting works anymore. It's not stacking up top 5 classes and making sure you win the national title. It's meticulously recruiting to fill needs and address voids on your team, similar to how the NFL does it. And Tennessee recruited very meticulously this year. They found an offensive tackle who is the crown jewel of their class in David Sanders, who they believe they can plug in to start immediately. David Sanders is Tennessee's most highly touted recruit since Eric Berry. I'm not talking about the most important, Nico Imaliava is that guy. I'm talking about the one when it comes to ratings. David Sanders is their highest rated recruit since Eric Berry. Look it up. On top of that, you have Deshaun Brame, who got a 4th star added to his recruiting just recently, a 5th star on a couple of services. They have stocked up on defensive linemen after just losing quite a few. Marion Dye, Isaiah Campbell. They had some issues at receiver. They lost 3 to the portal. They added 3. They're hoping that one of them could squeeze into the slot. They have a good backup quarterback now in George McIntyre, who may compete for the starting job, just saying. They were short on linebacker depth, so they added Christian Gass and Jaden Perlow. And Jaden Harmon, by the way. They needed some help at running back, and they added Don Morris and Justin Baker. So they specifically addressed needs. So I'm hot on that. But I'm hot on that for the second part of the strategy, which is, are you hot on the idea of them valuing? Actually, I'm going to save that hot. This is the next part of the strategy. Are you hot on them focusing on getting their recruits onto campus early, as early enrollees, so they can work with them, rather than wasting time trying to find splash recruits to upgrade their class at the very end in February? I'm cold on that. And I'm honestly telling you the truth. This is why I think they didn't have any movement National Signing Day. I think Heupel spends a lot of effort trying to get his kids onto campus as early as possible. That's one of the reasons he wants people like Brandon Anderson to shut down their recruitment, and Brandon Anderson then decommits for 2026. But Brandon Anderson is still looking at Tennessee and Josh Heupel, so maybe Heupel's on to something. But the reason he does that is because while the quarterbacks can pick up the offense very easily, receivers have a bit of a learning curve in this offense, and so do linemen. So I think Heupel wants them in early, because if he can get them through a spring, he can get a head start to have them more ready to go when it's time. But I'm still cold on it because I think you're wasting potential for some real talented guys in that gap between December and February, when there are still a few available elite superstar players that can really spike your class up. And if you're having trouble getting them, and it's because you desperately need to get these early enrollees focused on football and developing in the system, maybe you should simplify a little bit of what you do, honestly. So I'm kind of cold on that. I'm not the biggest fan of it, if I'm telling you the truth. I think Josh Heupel maybe needs to focus a little more on adding a couple of splash players, even if he loses out on a couple of guys that just won't be early enrollees. He's trying to sign guys. He's trying to focus on early enrollees. That's why he's trying to focus so heavily in the early signing period and only focus on guys that'll sign then. And I think it's costing him to a certain degree. Final hot or cold will be about the overall strategy. Hot or cold brought to you by City Heating and Air Conditioning. That's right, City Heating and Air, 50 years in East Tennessee. Integrity matters. CityHeatandAir.com, CityHeatandAir.com.
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard Heating and Air Conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air. There's your best.
All right, so the final hot or cold. Tennessee is valuing and focusing their NIL money on players returning rather than getting new commitments. Are we hot or cold on that? 5 years ago, I would have been as cold as you could possibly be. I'd have been as cold as you could possibly be. I would have said that's ridiculous. I would have had a big problem with that way of doing things because you got to get the talent and you got to stack the talent. But in this era of the transfer portal, of NIL, where you're kind of built like an NFL team, where if you go down a guy, you really have a big drop off in most places. I actually think I'm pretty hot on this. Honestly. I think chemistry can outweigh a lot of things. And I just go back to Michigan a couple of years ago when they won the national title. Michigan, yes, there was Ohio State this past year that had the best team money could buy with $20 million. They still lost 2 games, by the way. Michigan went undefeated. And it's because of their Those Who Stay campaign. They focused all their NIL efforts on spending the money to keep the players from the 2022 team and trying to get as many of them to stay as possible. These guys were late round NFL draft picks. They were not first rounders. They weren't going to blow you away as top 4 round NFL draft picks, but Michigan valued them enough to still try to keep them around, because usually if you're a late rounder, you still leave early. Michigan realized that if they could load up on fringe late rounders and keep them in the program, that level of chemistry is enough to go win a national title. And Michigan looked like they were far and away the most disciplined team in college football 2 years ago. And it didn't matter if Jim Harbaugh was on the sideline or not. They were the most disciplined team in college football, and it paid off. I think Tennessee's adopting that model, and I think it's a smart model. I think this day and age, you want guys that have experience playing together. I think that can limit your mistakes. It's just as similar as in the NFL, where it's very clear that when playoff time comes, the 2 biggest factors are who's healthy and also who's got the experience playing together. And teams that build through the draft typically play together better in the NFL. I mean, that happens all the time. Now, teams that go through free agency still can win the title, the Super Bowl, but they usually take a few years to do it. They have to have been playing together for a few years. That's where you see a lot of backloaded contracts. Tennessee is focused on they're focused more on how to keep a guy than how to get a guy. They're one of the only schools that's doing that in college football. Josh Pate said that while every other school is focused on the A part of the NIL, which is getting the player, Tennessee's focused on A, B, C, D, E, and F. And they're not going to sacrifice F for A. That's a big part of what Tennessee does. So that is why I am hot, and you should be hot on what Tennessee's doing, because honestly, to be fair to them, I think that they have a desire to keep players in to build a level of chemistry. And I think that's why this National Signing Day was relatively quiet. Matt brings up that Tennessee lost 14 players to the transfer portal. How many did they want to keep? Look, outside of Squirrel White, Matt, I'm going to be honest, I don't think they cared to keep that many. Okay? That's the point of this, is everybody's losing players to the transfer portal. Everybody. The question is, how many key players are you losing to the portal? Tennessee lost one player that we think they might have wanted to keep in Squirrel White to the transfer portal. That's it. They got everybody else back that they wanted, okay? So I got to be honest. I don't think this is as big of a deal. I want to set this up as a poll question real quick. What do you think of Tennessee's number 11 recruiting class for 2025? Fine. How about this? Great. Fine. Not good enough. There's more than just recruiting rankings. How about this? There's more than just... Let's see. How do you guys think I should phrase this? There's more than just recruit... how about this? Recruiting rankings overrated. Here we go. Okay, so here's the poll question. I'm setting it up for you guys now. What do you think of Tennessee's number 11 recruiting class for 2025? Great, fine, not good enough. Recruiting rankings are overrated. That is how we're going to phrase this for now. I'll say recruiting rankings are overrated, and I wouldn't have said that 5 years ago. But in the age of NIL, there are things that matter more. Okay, so I don't think it's as big of a deal as people think. We are going now to still stay on National Signing Day because we're going to address the question of the Big Ten versus the SEC and how the recruiting rankings all shook out and what they mean going forward now that we are done officially with this National Signing Day. First, a quick message from Ted Russell Studios.
Hey Ted, it's time to save some cash to our New Year's Dash.
Savings is my prime directive. Let's see what you got, Nick.
Right now, you can save up to $10,000 on new Ford F-150s. Beat that, Ted.
Most impressive, but how about 0% for 72 months on Ford Lightning or Ford Mustang Mach-E?
Ted Russell Ford has huge savings on whatever you're looking for.
This checks out.
Come see us today at either Ted Russell Ford location, Parkside Drive, or Kingston Pike.
All right. So now we are going to stick with some National Signing Day coverage and some recruiting news because there's a lot to get to related to this with college football. So you guys know where I stand on the SEC Big Ten contract issue. I spoke about this with Jimmy Hyams yesterday. I've spoken about it at length with Dave for a long time. I am of the belief that this SEC, that the contract disparity between the SEC and the Big Ten is going to come back to bite the SEC in the you-know-what. I just don't know when. I have no proof of when. I've been trying to figure that out for a long time, but I can't necessarily say when that's going to be. So, look, it's not going to happen overnight. And I think that's where a lot of people are confused because it didn't happen overnight here. And that if you look at the recruiting, the SEC is still as dominant as you could possibly be beyond the Big Ten. And that's very obvious. So just to give the rankings real quick, number 1 was Texas. Number 2 was Georgia. Number 3 is Alabama. So the top 3 teams are all SEC teams. Now, to be fair, number 4 is Ohio State. Number 5 is Oregon. Number 6 is Michigan. 3 Big Ten. But 3 SEC, 3 Big Ten, and 3 SEC are all higher. Then after that, you've got number 7 Auburn, number 8 Florida, number 9 Texas A&M, number 10 LSU, number 11 Tennessee. So 8 of the top 11 recruiting classes are all from the SEC. Then number 12, you have Notre Dame. Number 13, you have Miami. You get an ACC team in there. Number 14, USC. Number 15, Penn State. All right. So at this point, of the top 15, 8 are SEC and 5 are Big Ten. But then you go to Ole Miss at 16, Oklahoma at 17, South Carolina at 18, Florida State at 19, and Missouri at 20. So now of the top 20, we're talking 12 are from the SEC, and still just 5 are from the Big Ten, 2 ACC, 1 Notre Dame. Then you go Georgia Tech at 21, Nebraska at 22, Washington at 23, TCU 24, Maryland at 25, Nebraska, Washington, Maryland, at least lessen the gap to a certain degree because that then gives them 8. So with that in mind, of the top 25, 12 are from the SEC, 8 are from the Big Ten, and that even though the Big Ten has more teams, Miami, Georgia Tech, Florida State, 3 are from the ACC, 1's from the Big 12, and 1 is Notre Dame. Look, I'm sorry, but it's like when you break that down, it's like very obvious that the SEC is dominating right now. So what does this mean? Why is the SEC still recruiting so well? Well, a few reasons. I mean, one, there's the regional locational advantage, and as Dave talks about a lot, the pride and just the name brand of the SEC. Like that is a selling point in recruiting right now. The disparity in the money that I talk about isn't being shown yet because it's going to be shown based on when the boosters over time don't have to spend money on certain things. That's not going to happen overnight. So right now they're all kind of in the same boat, throwing the same amount of money at teams and players, honestly. That's a big deal. You also just have established programs and coaches. Texas, number 1, people believe in Steve Sarkisian. They made the college football playoff last year. They have a brand name in Arch Manning, and they have NIL. Texas literally has everything working for it right now, plus they're in the SEC and on ESPN every week. Georgia, number 2, has the most accomplished coach in college football, Kirby Smart. Alabama and Kalen DeBoer has one of the most accomplished program in college football of the last 25 years, but more importantly than that, you may say that's Nick Saban, that's fine, but you could also point out that Kalen DeBoer of up-and-comer coaches is the most exciting coach of all of them. People are really overrating his struggles last year going 9-4, okay? He's a very good coach. He had a bad quarterback to run his system, and he's got his offensive coordinator back, and I think players know that and see that. So Alabama at number 3 is interesting. Ohio State at number 4, Ryan Day did just win a national championship, but also Ohio State opened the NIL checkbook. Then they lost Chip Kelly to the NFL. I don't think they have the same momentum, so that's going to be hard. Oregon, number 5, the Nike money, Dan Lanning. Michigan at number 6, there's still a belief in Sharon Moore, and there's still a belief in what the program they were doing under Jim Harbaugh, despite a drop-off last year. They did finish strong. They beat Ohio State and Alabama. I mean, what can you say about that? So that has to count for something for them to finish strong. Auburn at number 7 and Florida at number 8. I know, because people I've talked to, that Auburn and Florida are in the top 10 because they're putting Hugh Freeze and Billy Napier on notice. The boosters have opened up their NIL checkbooks on the recruiting trail, and they did it with Auburn in the transfer portal because they want to say, you guys got to show us you can go out and win. And we're going to get you the talent to do it, but we're tired of waiting. That's why they're there. The same with LSU at number 10. I've given you guys my theories in the past on LSU being able to dominate, and Texas A&M at number 9. You're going to see this type of recruiting from the SEC still for the next few years. The question is going to become, will all those kids stay in the program? And will the coaches get the amount of leeway that they maybe should get but won't, particularly with money being thrown around the way it is? That is where the questions really come from. And we don't know how that's going to play out, honestly. And I got to be honest, until it does, I think that just because these recruiting rankings are what they are doesn't necessarily mean that the SEC is going to have the advantages long-term over the Big Ten. I mean, the SEC, look, this past year was still the better conference. It had one less team in the college football playoff, and the Big Ten won the national title. I get that. But top to bottom, the SEC was the better conference. I'm sorry, it was. Okay? Big Ten fans may not want to hear that, but it was. But Big Ten fans, like, even though this, I will give you, this recruiting ranking of the 1 through 11 that I just gave you is a little bit overrated. What's going to happen when half the players from Auburn and Florida transfer out? You know, Nebraska's up and coming under Matt Rule. what's going to happen when they're able to poach a few of these players? This is going to become more common as time goes on. South Carolina's number 18 right now because they have Lenora Sellers and Shane Beamer had a heck of a year. They're not going to be in the top 20 in 2 years. Oklahoma's number 17 because people still somewhat believe in Brent Venables. They're not going to be in the top 25 after Brent Venables is fired. Ole Miss is number 16 because of Lane Kiffin every year demanding money from NIL boosters. That's not going to happen as long as once Lane Kiffin's gone. Missouri's number 20 because Eli Drinkwitz keeps cashing in on an easy schedule in the SEC. They're not going to stay number 20. I'm just going to point some teams out for you down at the bottom part for the record, because where you talk about things getting a little dangerous, even though the SEC is still the dominant one, and I'm not denying that, Nebraska in the top 25, that's actually pretty impressive for them. That's a sign that they're getting better as a program. I know you guys can think I'm crazy for saying that. That's a sign that they're getting better as a program. Oregon in the top 5 is a sign that they're getting better as a program with NIL. Oregon was, when they were at their peak during the Chip Kelly years, during the Mark Helfrich years with Mariota, they never had top 5 classes. They always had good classes, but not top 5. Maryland at number 25. This is Maryland's best recruiting class in a couple decades. Okay. If I'm not lying, I do think that's their first top 25 class since Ralph Ricci was there. So don't look just at where the rankings are. Look at where the rankings are going, because schools like Nebraska, Maryland, Washington at number 23 don't typically get into the top 25 in recruiting, and they're in the top 25 now. And that is a sign of things to come in the future where the schools are going to start recruiting a lot better as they build names for themselves and get more money. So that's why I say the 8 of 11 shows the SEC still dominating in recruiting right now. It's true. I got nothing on that. But if you look deeper, you're going to see a lot of schools that are starting to climb the ladder with this Big Ten NIL money. And that's going to be a big, big issue. So when you take that into account, I honestly think that we're not far off from starting to see the Big Ten start to win those recruiting battles. And it's probably closer than you guys think, particularly when you look down the road at 2026. I just want to point this out, guys. This is early. You don't judge things too early. But just for argument's sake, Oregon's got the number 1 rated 2026 class. USC's got the number 3 rated 2026 class. Penn State's got the 4th rated 2026 class right now. Texas A&M's 2, Tennessee's 5. So 3 of the top 5 are from the Big Ten. Okay. Rutgers is in the top 15 right now. Iowa's in the top 20. Illinois is in the top 20. Ohio State's in the top 20. Maryland's number 24. UCLA's number 25. You're about to start seeing this NIL money that I've told you guys about with the Big Ten become an advantage from them. And this is bank on it. Bank on it. 2025 is the last year you see the SEC dominate these recruiting rankings the way they have with the top 11. Bank on it.
Commercial Bank is your neighborhood bank. What makes us different from other banks? We understand that every customer has unique opportunities, challenges, and financial concerns. We don't expect you to fit into the same box as the next person or business. Whether it's purchasing a home, saving for your child's future, or planning for your next vacation, we're with you every step of the way to navigate life's big decisions. Commercial.
That's right. Bank on it. The SEC has 8 of the top 11 recruiting classes, showing their dominance still, but it's not going to last. This is the last year they are that dominant. They still may have, overall in the conglomerate, better recruiting classes in 2026 and 2027, but you're going to see that gap more and more narrow. And here's where the real difference hits in, guys. The real difference is going to kick in 2031. That's when the Big Ten renegotiates its contract. And it's much, much bigger than the SEC. Now, a lot of things are going to change in college football before then, okay? What's not going to change is you're going to have the Big Ten and SEC both as conferences existing. They both don't want to dissolve, and they both have a lot of power. So they're going to constantly be in an arms race for teams they want to add and TV contracts they want to sign. And I'm just going to tell you that the Big Ten's contract is up in 2031, and the SEC stuck in this contract with ESPN through 2034. Okay, so because they're stuck in that through 2033. So the SEC can't re-up until 2034. Big Ten can re-up in 2031. What do you think is going to happen when the Big Ten, which already is bringing in 300% more than the SEC? Every Big Ten school is bringing in an NIL budget, an Ohio State NIL budget more than Tennessee of $20 million, $22 million, because the Big Ten gets $1 billion a year and the SEC gets $300 million from TV revenue. What's going to happen when the Big Ten ups their contract in 2031? And the SEC still stuck in this $300 million a year contract through 2034. The Big Ten's going to re-up, and they're going to get up to 1.1, 1.2, maybe 1.3 billion. There could be 3 years where the Big Ten as a conference brings in $1 billion more in TV revenue than the SEC, even though the SEC has way better brands overall. That gap's going to get bigger, and you could get to a point, if this thing moves rapidly, the SEC could be playing catch-up. Now, it could just be a trend, and if it's a trend, then the SEC could catch up quickly by getting a good deal in 2034. But if it happens rapidly, man, the SEC could fall far behind, and they could fall far behind fast, okay? So they have to be careful. Portions of the program are brought to you by Hemp House, the premier hemp dispensary online with a wide variety, great selection, and strict standards. Hemp House Chat with 2Ts.com. Hemp House Chat with 2Ts.com. Use the promo code HOOKED for 10% off. Also brought to you by Hound Dogs of Knoxville. Champions look good in orange. HDKnoxville.com. HDKnoxville.com. That's right. I am dead serious. I'm not changing my thoughts on this. Tennessee has a lot to worry about. Let's get to the stat of the day real quick. Stat of the day is brought to you by Dynasty Pools and Spas.
Dave Hooker here for Dynasty Pools and Spas, your home for the best spas and everything you need to jump right in. Relaxing, therapeutic, absolutely. But what sets Dynasty Pools and Spas apart from others is that you get everything with any spa purchase. You get the cover lift, the steps, delivery, and chemicals. When Dynasty Pools and Spas delivers your spa from their Athens location within 125 miles, you'll get your own personal hydrotherapy spa. Mention me, Dave Hooker, or Off the Hook Sports, and get $500 off your top quality new spa. Dynasty Pools and Spas, just off the Athens exit. Drop in and receive a free gift from Off the Hook Sports, Dynasty Pools and Spas. Mention Off the Hook Sports for a drop-in prize and that $500 discount. Dynasty Pools and Spas. To check out some of the Dynasty Spa models and to buy spa chemicals, go to dynastypoolsandspas.com.
All right, welcome back. Our stat of the day still goes back to Tennessee's win over Florida last week because it's just such a standout win in a lot of ways. One of the biggest ones is that was Tennessee's 18th sellout in the last 3 seasons, and they had improved to 35-15 all time at Food City Center sellouts with that win, including a 24-7 mark in Rick Barnes' 10-year tenure. So when they fill up Thompson Bowling Arena, man, they get scary. All right, when we come back, there's a rule change coming to college football that Tennessee fans are probably going to love, and I'm going to dive into the history of the Lady Vols rivalry with UConn. So please stick with us. 2.5 minutes. We will be right back.
Well, Ted, looks like you're settling right into your new space.
Affirmative. Powered by the new Ford Lightning.
You know, that would be incredible for camping, tailgating. The options are unlimited. Why don't you take a little power for yourself, buddy?
Beep boop beep bop.
Get into this new 2024 Ford F-150 Power Boost for only $53,300, or get 0% for 72 months on a Ford F-150 Lightning. Come see us today at either Ted Russell Ford location, Parkside Drive, or Kingston Pike, or online at tedrussellford.net.
Sports Treasures in North Knoxville is one of the South's largest sports cards and memorabilia dealers, featuring over 10 million sports cards from vintage to modern. Sports Treasures carries a full line of hobby boxes, singles, autographed memorabilia, Tennessee Vols collectibles, fan cave decorations, and so much more. See a museum full of collectibles at Sports Treasures, 4819 North Broadway in Fountain City, and Sports Treasures on Facebook. Sports Treasures, where the real sports fan goes to shop.
Community banking is about location and much more. It's about family. We reside in your community. We are a part of your community. At Commercial Bank, our commitment extends beyond the walls of our branches. It's displayed each day in the opportunities we provide, the money we give back, and the time we commit, all to help improve the lives of the people, families, and businesses that make our communities great. Commercial Bank, life made better.
Double D Piping provides full-service fire protection on any scale. From residential homes to government facilities, we can assist any customer through design, fabrication, installation, inspection, and demonstration of fire suppression systems. With 30 years of service across 5 states and a full staff with over 40 years experience, our quality can't be beaten. Don't get caught watching what you could have prevented. Call Double D Piping, the absolute best in fire prevention.
With our brand new location on Emory Road, Eye Care Optical is bringing East Tennessee's best eye care to your neighborhood. Doctors Johnston and Combs offer unmatched expertise and care without a trip to Knoxville. Eye Care Optical, now in Powell.
Are you ready to get strong? At NFC, we offer top-notch weight training and functional fitness, so you can build strength and improve your performance. Join today at nfc1.com or stop by any one of our 7.
Welcome back to Off the Hook Sports. Portions of the program brought to you by Peak IV Hydration in South Knoxville and Sevierville. Live your life to the fullest. Hydrate, rejuvenate, and elevate your health with Peak IV Hydration. Also brought to you by Rick Terry Jewelry Designs. They want to be your jeweler. Looking for affordable game day jewelry, a Tennessee tradition. RickTerryJewelry.com. All right. We're going to dive into rules changes in college football, which everybody loves to talk about this time of year. Am I right? Honestly, if you're a Tennessee fan, you should, because it looks like there is a discussion to finally, and I mean finally, address the long-standing, frustrating issue of players faking injuries. This is something that just came out recently. Tennessee had, the SEC. I can't even talk, guys, right now. The NCAA Football Rules Committee. I don't know why I said Tennessee or the SEC. The NCAA Football Rules Committee is going to gather later this month, according to Chris Vanini of The Athletic, for their annual meeting to discuss potential changes from overtime timeouts to replay challenge and more. But the topic of feigning injuries for clock management or rest purposes is atop the docket. The coaching class that created and exacerbated the problem is trying to fix it, though they don't all agree. Remember, we talked about this last month after the American Football Coaches Association convention in Charlotte. A small group of coaches suggested that a player removed from the game due to injury must sit out the rest of the drive. If the trainers and doctors clear a player to return on the drive, a team can use a timeout to buy that player back in the game if they set out at least one play. The rule would not apply to players injured by a hit that results in a penalty. According to Steve Shaw, National Coordinator of Officials and Committee Rules Editor, he said that there's a push by stakeholders in the game saying on feigning injuries, something must be done. And his exact quote is, "We can't kick the can down the road once again." Now, the AFC idea was not presented to the overall group of FBS coaches who met in Charlotte, but the idea is going to be discussed by the Rules Committee. Shaw emphasized that specific idea of having to sit out a drive if you get hurt, and said it may not be the ultimate result, but the group will debate it. It's obviously it seems like a simple solution, but it's not. I'm going to give you guys a little more details, but I'm going to tell you why it's not a simple solution. But the first one, the coach is pushing back, they're lying. There is this concern for the quarterbacks. What if a quarterback has to come out of a late drive due to a cramp and their team is out of a timeout? It's a huge personnel loss. Okay, first of all, that's a lie. Because how many times do quarterbacks miss plays because they're hurt? That's just stupid. That doesn't, I mean, from a minor injury is what I'm trying to talk about. Quarterbacks miss plays because they're hurt. But how often is a quarterback knocked out of a game for a play and then comes back in? That's just ridiculous, guys. That doesn't happen. But another idea comes out of that, which is called the green dot player. One player on the field with a coach-to-player helmet communication, typically the quarterback, and one defensive player. Perhaps they would only have to sit out one play if they're clear to return. That way, the guy calling the plays could fake the injury. And someone brings up the point that, to be fair, quarterbacks aren't the ones faking injuries. They're not the problem. No one's ever accused the quarterback of faking the injury. I understand that, but the linebacker might, so you never know. Now, I will say they wouldn't want that linebacker off for a drive either that's calling the plays. So all of this is very understandable and very complex. Here's the concern for players faking injuries or addressing this. There's a belief that if you have players sit out a whole drive, they won't go down and have their injuries looked at the way they should because they don't want to be pulled out of an entire drive. Right now, for safety purposes, Davis talked about this, players are taught to go down immediately if something twinks. It's a win-win because they get to slow the offense, but also we've learned in football now there can be minor injuries that turn out to be major if you play on them. My argument is that I've seen enough on video that 90% of the players faking injuries are just faking them. They're not hurt. They're just going down to fake them. I would still coach go down if you're faking an injury. I mean, go down if you feel a minor twinge. You'll be out a drive. You won't be out a game. I don't think it's going to be 90% of the time. It's not going to be an issue. It'll be an issue that 10% of the time where a player's a little banged up and doesn't want to miss a drive. But that's why the drive is the good compromise. They're not missing a quarter. They're not missing a half. They're not missing the rest of the game. The drive is the best compromise possible. Now, some people might bring up, well, then they could just, if a team gets inside the 20-yard line or 10-yard line, the other player will just fake an injury and they don't miss much of the drive. True, but once you get that deep into the red zone, you don't run as much tempo to begin with. So that's not going to matter as much. So honestly, I think this is actually the best way to address this, is to basically say players going down, they have to miss the whole drive. It's a sacrifice, it's a risk, but it's not as big of a risk as I think people think it's going to be. I don't think it's as bad. We'll talk about this more in a second. First, a quick message again from Ted Russell Ford.
Well, Ted, looks like you're settling right into your new space.
Affirmative. Powered by the new Ford Lightning.
You know, that would be incredible for camping, tailgating. The options are unlimited. Why don't you take a little power for yourself, buddy?
Beep boop beep bop.
Get into this new 2024 Ford F-150 Power Boost for only $53,300, or get 0% for 72 months on a Ford F-150 Lightning. Come see us today at either Ted Russell Ford location, Parkside Drive, or Kingston Pike.
All right. Welcome back. Again, the show is brought to you by Sports Treasures, carrying over 5 million sports treasures and so much more. Follow on Facebook for the best sports memorabilia daily updates. Facebook.com/sports treasures TN. Facebook.com/sports treasures TN. Another rules change I wanted to address that they're talking about. They've actually talked about instant replay and the possibility of moving to a coach challenge model like the NFL. It's been deliberated by the committee in recent years. Coaches have generally been against it because it moves the burden of calling for replay review to them, and no-huddle offenses make it more difficult for team personnel to rewatch plays before challenge compared to the NFL. So Shaw wouldn't say whether or not it's more likely to get out of the committee, but Division II college football in 2023 added an optional coach challenge model for games where there is not a replay booth official. It's obviously something that's happened. Cited as an example, the Georgia Tech game last year in November lasted 8 overtimes, saw 3 timeouts called during the 5 periods of the 2-point shootout that began in the 3rd overtime. Multiple bowl games also went to at least 5 overtimes. Shaw said there's no interest in changing the overtime format. This is something about overtime timeouts. They're trying to debate about the overtime timeouts, but there is talk of the format, which was created in 2021, cutting down the additional timeouts to prevent the slowdown of the end of the game. I think the college football overtime is actually hot take. I don't really mind this. You guys can hate me on this all day. I think college football overtime is fine. I know people like the old model. The old model was dangerous. Players were playing way too much. I think if you can't get it done in regulation, then it's not a big deal if you have to lose off a gimmick, off a 2-point play. Sorry. I actually don't believe in overtimes. I'm just going to tell you guys something. More hot take. I think there should be ties in college football. I'm a believer in ties. I think have 2 overtimes. If you don't win the game in 2 overtimes, it's tied. I don't like this whole 2-point conversion back and forth thing anyway. So I'm for any of the game in a tie, but also I don't mind it because you didn't get it done in regulation when you should have. So I'm for any of the game in a tie. I think that's a lost art of college football. It's taken away some strategy that I thought would be epic. If you got to do you play for the win? Do you play for the tie on a final drive? It would make things a lot more fun. Put it that way, particularly with standings in the college football playoff. That would be epic. Bring back ties. That's my rules change for college football in overtime. Bring back the tie, except for in the playoff. In the playoff, you have to do overtime. I get that in postseason play and in the playoff, then do the overtime rules. But until then, bring back the tie. That's what I want in college football. But I will say this rules change, the main rules change that we're talking about, the players faking injury, I think is a good compromise. It's the least bad option when there's no good options. How about that? It's the least bad option when there's no good options. I took media law in college, and one of the things we learned about the First Amendment, funny enough, is that protecting misinformation as speech is the least bad option. Nobody wants to protect misinformation as protected speech, but there's no way you could ban misinformation without banning certain types of speech that you don't want to ban because they would undercut the First Amendment. So protecting misinformation was always the least bad option. Doing this, having players sit out a drive if they go down with an injury, is the least bad option in college football to address the players faking injuries. So I think that's a good way to do it. We're about to get to this day in Tennessee sports history. First portions of the program brought to you by Work Trucks. We're all about trucks that are actually available, trucks that help you maximize your profits by having the right work vehicle. Now, time is money. The perfect work vehicle doesn't break down and has all the space to carry what you need. That's what Work Trucks is intent on offering, while other dealerships just can't do it. Contracting is about time. Work Trucks saves you time with less back and forth trips and trucks that pass the highest standards to be put to work. The process is also quick and easy when choosing a vehicle for Work Trucks. Cargo vans, utility body trucks with the nap-hide work bodies installed, pickup trucks of all sizes, and anything special like cranes or dump trucks. Work Truck supplies vehicles to people just like you and get you back on the road tomorrow. No dealership runaround. If you're a contractor, you need to know Work Trucks, and that's a fact. Service industry, remember Work Trucks. Work Trucks carries the trucks that your business has to have. You need Work Trucks. Clinton Highway in Knoxville and in downtown Birmingham. For the entire inventory, go online to worktrucksllc.com. Worktrucks with an X, LLC.com. That's worktrucksllc.com with an X. Why risk chancing your future in business on the wrong piece of equipment that burns your time? worktrucksllc.com. Work Trucks will also work to make sure that you have the perfect vehicle you have to have. They'll even find a perfect truck, outfit it, and make sure it fits your needs to a T. Work Trucks with an X, LLC.com. WorkTrucksLLC.com, proud supporters of the Tennessee Vols. This day in Tennessee sports history is one that goes back 7 years ago. You guys will love this. Tennessee basketball on this day led the Vols to their first regular season sweep of Kentucky in men's basketball since the 80s. Tennessee basketball beat Kentucky 61-59 in Lexington on this day. Tennessee was ranked number 15. Kentucky was number 24. Lamonte Turner hit a three late to give the Vols a 61-59 win. They had beaten Kentucky 76-65 at home earlier in the year. Tennessee was able to complete a regular season sweep of Kentucky, something they hadn't done since the 80s. It was a legendary moment at Rupp Arena. Rupp Arena is obviously not the place where people go to win a lot of games. As a matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, Tennessee hadn't won a game at Rupp Arena at that time since 2006. Rupp is just not a place they win, but they won at Rupp, and they had won at home earlier in the year, so they completed a regular season sweep of Kentucky for the first time since the 80s. It was a legendary moment. That is this day in Tennessee sports history. And speaking of basketball, I'm going to stay on the hardwood. When we come back in about 2 minutes, we're going to close the show talking about the Lady Vols UConn rivalry as that series renews again tonight with Kim Caldwell versus Gino Auriemma. Stick with us. We'll be right back in 2 minutes.
Why Banks & Jones? Well, it's because they're Tennessee's trial attorney. You can play to win with Banks & Jones because they'll go to trial. You've heard of other lawyers. They say they'll go to trial and fight for you. They won't. They just want to settle. That's the easiest way out. Well, that's not Banks & Jones, led by T. Scott Jones. They won't settle. They'll go to trial for you. Tennessee's trial attorney. They play to win. Truly, Tennessee's trial attorney when it comes to criminal defense or personal injury. Why settle? It's Banks & Jones. T. Scott Jones. BanksandJones.com. Dave Hooker here for Dynasty Pools and Spas. Your home for the best spas and everything you need to jump right in. Relaxing? Therapeutic? Absolutely. But what sets Dynasty Pools and Spas apart from others is that you get everything with any spa purchase. You get the cover lift, the steps, delivery, and chemicals. When Dynasty Pools and Spas delivers your spa from their Athens location within 125 miles, you'll get your own personal hydrotherapy spa. Mention me, Dave Hooker, or Off the Hook Sports, and get $500 off your top quality new spa. Dynasty Pools and Spas, just off the Athens exit. Drop in and receive a free gift from Off the Hook Sports, Dynasty Pools and Spas. Mention Off the Hook Sports for a drop-in prize and that $500 discount, Dynasty Pools and Spas. To check out some of the Dynasty Spa models and to buy spa chemicals, go to dynastypoolsandspas.com. Dynasty Pools and Spas.
Now in its 45th year, the second and third generations continue Joe Newbert's commitment.
His vision of what this business needed to be, we still try to live up to that.
Joe Newbert Collision Center.
With our brand new location on Emory Road, Eye Care Optical is bringing East Tennessee's best eye care to your neighborhood. Doctors Johnston and Combs offer unmatched expertise and care without a trip to Knoxville. Eye Care Optical.
Welcome back to Off the Hook Sports, the show brought to you by the UPS Store Haun Valley, helping individuals and small businesses, wide range of products and services, locally owned and operated. That's 10629 Hardin Valley Road. Go check it out. The Lady Vols play UConn Thursday night. As we know in women's basketball, Tennessee and UConn was the rivalry that stopped the world for a long time. The funniest part about it, though, was the coaches at the heart of the rivalry did not like what it stood for and were both a little bit short-sighted. Gino Auriemma talked about what happened with the rivalry before the hiatus. And for those who don't remember, there was a hiatus between the 2007 series and when it was revived in 2020. He has gone out of his way to emphasize that the rivalry isn't what it once was, nor should it be. And in a recent interview with ESPN, which I think is just a ridiculous thing that he said something so utterly nonsensical that he doesn't even realize the importance of promoting a sport that he's been a part of for 30 years. He was asked about the rivalry, and he said, quote, "It became something that wasn't normal," referring to the acrimony that grew between Tennessee fan bases, coaches, and programs. He continues, "It just became stupid and became something I didn't want to be a part of anymore. I think our fans are stupid. I think their fans are stupid and how they reacted to the whole thing. It just became something other than a basketball game, and after a while, it just got old. It's one of the dumbest statements anyone has ever said about the sport they coached. Okay. The women's basketball rivalry between Tennessee and UConn and the way it stopped the women's basketball world had a huge hand in promoting women's basketball as a sport. Remember, I mean, this is like saying that the Magic and Bird rivalry was stupid. Like, what? No, it wasn't. There was probably animosity back then. Some of you guys can quote me. I was born in the late 80s, so I didn't follow the Magic Bird rivalry. But I know enough history to know that it helped prop up the NBA to heights that it had never seen before, which led to the Dream Team, which led to Michael Jordan become the biggest global icon in the history of modern era professional sports, which created the way for LeBron and Kobe and all these other superstars. Now, the Magic and Bird rivalry did that. Yeah, elements of it were stupid. Unfortunately, it was somewhat racial. Okay, there were certain people that sided with Bird and certain people that sided with Magic, and it kind of became a bit of a who looks like you part, which is fine, though. It was okay. It was okay because it promoted the NBA, and it was good for everybody. How is Gina Auriemma going to sit there and say the Lady Vols UConn rivalry became stupid? Yeah, there was acrimony and hatred. Does he not know what college sports is about? College sports rivalries are stupid. People do stupid stuff, and then he acts like I didn't want to be a part of it anymore. That's just a dumb take and a dumb statement. And to act like it wasn't good for the sport is ridiculous. Killing it was bad for the sport. Killing it was terrible for the sport and actually delayed the growth of women's basketball. Because in the early 2000s, women's basketball was really pushing men's basketball for ratings in the NCAA tournament, and it fell apart. Now, a couple of things happened. At the time the rivalry ended, Tennessee had kind of resupplanted themselves as dominant over UConn. But then right after the rivalry ended, UConn became the dominant one. But it always came down to recruits. And narratives and storylines that have come since then are only known within Tennessee and UConn circles that could have been much more national, but they're not because of them ending the rivalry. Now, rest in peace, but I'm not here to let Pat Summitt off the hook either for this, because Pat Summitt tried to do everything right and above board, and I know she was committed to promoting the women's basketball game, but she wanted to promote it in a way that is not how you promote the game. Sorry, drama, salaciousness, and fun sells. Pat Summitt had a problem her whole career with when they play UConn, Gino Auriemma throwing shade the way he did at Tennessee. And for those who don't know, the first time the Lady Vols and UConn played, I'm actually pulling up the rivalry right now just so we can pull this up. But it wasn't initially a regular season rivalry. It became one because of things that were happening in the NCAA tournament. Tennessee was the established program. They'd won 3 national titles before UConn won their first national title. But the two first met in 1995. I believe that was UConn's first national title season. You guys can quote me on that. I'm looking it up now. But if I'm not mistaken, UConn's first national title season was the two met in 1995 when UConn won their first national title. They went 35-0 that year. And they just randomly met for a regular season matchup. UConn won the game 77-66. UConn was number 2. Tennessee was number 1. UConn ended up winning the national title. It was a huge matchup. It meant everything. They met later that year when UConn beat Tennessee in the NCAA tournament. That was for the national championship. So they met in the regular season, and then they met in the NCAA tournament, and in both instances, UConn won. That's really what sparked the rivalry, was that first year, because that ended up being the difference in the national title. That was the Rebecca Lobo year. That was the start of how the rivalry became. Tennessee lost 3 games that year. 2 were to UConn. The other one was in the SEC tournament to Vanderbilt, close one. So anyways, getting back to it, what happens the next year? Tennessee plays UConn at home and loses again. Okay, they lose again, and they lose 59-53. But Tennessee goes on to play UConn in the 1996 NCAA tournament in the Final Four and beats them 88-83 in overtime. A year later, Tennessee plays UConn and loses to them for the third time in 4 years, 72-57. But in the NCAA tournament, Tennessee is a low 3 seed, not expected to win it, shocks UConn in the Elite Eight when UConn was undefeated as the number 1 overall team, and Tennessee goes to win the national title. That established the rivalry. UConn led the series 4-2, but Tennessee had won 2 NCAA tournament games against them. The UConn's 1, and the winner head-to-head of the last 3 in the NCAA tournament would go on to win the national championship. The rivalry was set in stone. Then you had Tennessee win 2 more, 98 and 99. You had UConn beat them in 2000, and then Tennessee beat the. I'm sorry, yeah, you had them split the series. Funny enough, they played twice in 2000, and Tennessee won in Connecticut, and UConn won in Knoxville, and then they played a third time in the national title, which UConn won, and then became a period of where UConn was just knocking Tennessee out of the tournament every year. They played twice, 2 years in a row for the national title. Tennessee responded by getting Candace Parker. They beat UConn 3 years in a row, and then the series ended. Gino Auriemma, during all this time, as the rivalry was getting very heated, was throwing more and more shots at Pat Summitt, as he was the up-and-comer and Pat Summitt was the established coach. Pat Summitt didn't like that. She also didn't like Gino Auriemma's recruiting tactics. Gino Auriemma would take players, give them tours of ESPN. I mean, it is suspicious how many UConn graduates at that time got jobs at ESPN. And guess what? If you were a women's basketball player at that time, you had to think about your jobs after college because the WNBA wasn't about to pay you that much, and the endorsements weren't going to come with it. So with that in mind, there were some recruiting tactics Pat Summitt didn't like. So Pat Summitt, after Gino Auriemma used those tactics to get Maya Moore into the series, because the rivalry became intensely about who you could get. Gino and Pat both intensely wanted Candace Parker, Diana Taurasi, Maya Moore, and the frustration, because women's college basketball during that time came down to who could get that best player, the generational player. And Pat Summitt ended the series. That was a very short-sighted move by Pat Summitt. I'm sorry. It was. It just propelled UConn to new heights because Tennessee was benefiting from that series and that rivalry. UConn had more resources at the time, and Gino Auriemma was more cutting edge with this style of play, and it allowed UConn to take it to a whole nother level, and UConn unleashed a dynasty from between the period of 2007 and 2016, where I believe they won 6 national titles during that time, 3 undefeated seasons. So it was very, for all the things Pat Summitt did that were good for the women's game, her insistence on above board play and putting the entertainment value of a great rivalry behind her was a problem. And Gino seeing what he's seeing now was also a problem. And it shows how short-sighted some of the older coaches can be in promoting the game. It also shows how gaslighting Gino Auriemma is. Because an underrated part of this rivalry that would have made big news were they playing each other at the time, but they weren't because the rivalry ended from Pat Summitt. And Tennessee wasn't as relevant at this moment, was 2016. For those who don't know, in 2016, when Pat Summitt tragically passed away, the year Pat passed away, Gino Auriemma, out of pure spite, kept Candace Parker off the Olympic team that year. Everybody tied to the program during the trials and auditions and practices were saying Candace Parker was one of the 3 best players out there, clearly belonged, probably the best, was dominating everybody, and Gino Auriemma didn't pick her. Out of pure spite that Candace Parker didn't commit to him when he was coaching at UConn 13 years, well, he's still coaching at UConn, but that didn't commit to him 13 years earlier to UConn. I'm dead serious. You can look it up. He refused to sign Candace Parker out of pure spite. There was a Candace Parker curse facing Gino Auriemma because UConn had just completed its 2nd straight undefeated season that year, dominating everybody, and Gino Auriemma hasn't won a national title since that year. So many people believe there is a Candace Parker curse for him leaving her off the team because that was disgusting and despicable. And he did it and made the decision within 2 months of Pat Summitt dying when it was clear that was going to happen. A sick, twisted move. And then he comes out and says this lie that the UConn rivalry became stupid. Well, hey, Gino, maybe it's stupid to leave Candace Parker off the Olympic team out of sheer pettiness that she committed to Tennessee. You're such a hypocrite for calling this rivalry stupid and saying that the fans were stupid when you purposely left a player off your team because they committed to Tennessee. And at that time, Tennessee and UConn hadn't been playing for 9 years and you were in the midst of 4 straight national titles. How in the world can you say the rivalry was stupid and call the fans stupid for that? See, this is why Gino is so utterly unlikable as a person. He's a liar and a hypocrite, and he's gaslighting everybody. He took the rivalry personally. I just said that Pat Summitt should have engaged in some of the feud and the back and forth. But Gino, as the new guy on campus, was notoriously throwing shots at Pat Summitt back and forth throughout the time they were going head to head because he was trying to promote UConn and get them on that level, and it worked. It's the same way Lane Kiffin was throwing shots when he was at Tennessee. Here's what this is like. Could you imagine who remembers all those shots Lane Kiffin was throwing at Florida in 2009 in football? It was a common thing. Could you imagine if Lane Kiffin kept throwing those shots and then Lane Kiffin started winning against Florida and they started going back and forth? And as Lane Kiffin started beating Florida, he comes up and he says, the rivalry got stupid and I just didn't like it. And our fans didn't like it either. Or if Steve Spurrier ever said that about the Tennessee-Florida rivalry. Spurrier never would have said that because Spurrier knew he was needling Tennessee. Gino was constantly needling Pat all the time. And again, I'm not knocking that. You should do that. You're trying to promote your program, and the rivalry was good for the sport. But then for you to come back and say this rivalry was stupid because of the way people behaved on both sides, you were part of that behavior. You literally left one of the greatest players in Tennessee history, arguably the greatest player, off an Olympic team you were coaching specifically because she committed to Tennessee. And you did it when you guys hadn't played Tennessee in 9 years at that point and had clearly moved past Tennessee as a program. So who are you to say the rivalry became stupid? You act like such an elder statesman, and you're not. And it makes me sick. I hate creeps and I hate liars like that. I hate it creeps me out. It grosses me out when someone pretends to be a statesman and they are just like the rest of us. It's just one of the most annoying things in anything. And so I got to be honest, he is such a liar on that. So that's the history of the Tennessee-UConn rivalry. I'm one of those people that doesn't think Pat Summitt is above blame here. Being way too much of a statesperson herself, and she was, because she actually acted like a statesperson. I think that she doesn't realize that she stalled the growth of the women's game because people wanted those rivalries. At the same time, I think that Gino pretending that the rivalry got stupid and blaming fans when he behaves certain ways to spike that rivalry is just absolutely one of the dumbest things I've ever heard anybody say, and one of the most hypocritical I've ever heard anybody say. So when Kim Caldwell and Gino Auriemma tip off tonight, it's kind of funny that Gino's going to come across as the old fuddy-duddy, out of touch with the game of women's college basketball and the entertainment. This is the same, by the way, when people with the Caitlin Clark saga right now in the WNBA, you see a bunch of sides on it. No one's taking this approach, and I'm taking this approach. Some of the hate for Caitlin Clark is stupid. It's irrational. And I don't think it's fair from other WNBA players. It's also great for the sport because you see, everybody says it's bad for the sport. They're killing their own cash cow. No, they're not. When you see Caitlin Clark get abused by other players on the court, and if she starts going back at them, you're going to see rivalries and people watch the games because they're either going to want to root for Caitlin Clark or against her, depending on how you feel about the situation. I think that the same thing can be held true for this. And Kim Caldwell is now the young gun. And the interesting thing about this is Kim Caldwell runs as out-entertained Gino Auriemma in what she runs. UConn was one of the first guard-oriented women's basketball programs. They still were ahead of the curve in that. You still have the Dawn Staley's of the world. UConn really went guard-oriented in tempo before anybody did in women's basketball. Kim Caldwell has decided, I'm going to take that up a totally different notch. And that's going to make one of the most exciting things to see in women's basketball because now Kim Caldwell is the flashy young coach that Gino Auriemma was when this rivalry first started. And I'm just waiting on Gino Auriemma to pretend like he's above the rivalry again after, depending on what happens in this game. That's one of the most pathetic lies I've ever heard anybody say. I was just going to dive into the history of the rivalry, but when I read that quote from Gino Auriemma, it set me off on a tangent. For him to act like the rivalry was stupid, as if he didn't have a hand in that, was really, 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 really dumb. And I think I would say he's better than that, but he's not better than that. he's a pretty low-class guy. The show represented by Banks & Jones, banksandjones.com. T. Scott Jones, they'll go to trial for you. Banks & Jones, live from the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln studio. Ted Russell Ford Lincoln is your home for the finest vehicles in Knoxville, new and used. East Tennessee's largest Ford and Lincoln volume dealer. Thank you guys all for tuning in today. Hope to have Dave back tomorrow. Again, he had a doctor's appointment, so hope everything's okay with that. And again, thanks again for tuning in with all of you guys and working with me on this. I know it can be a little difficult when I'm on my own, but I really appreciate you guys. You guys have a great rest of your day. For Caleb Calhoun, this has been a presentation of Off the Hook Sports.